On this episode of Tips from the Top Floor, a discussion with my guest CJ Chilvers on why you shouldn't trust someone like me to tell you how to do your photography, a look behind the scenes of how to build a wallpaper pack with 20 images at 12 different crops, making this 240 individual files, and another great watch this video tip. Today, a photo shoot with Benedict Cumberbatch. This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the easiest way to create a beautiful website, blog, or online store for you and your ideas. Squarespace features an elegant interface, beautiful templates, and incredible 24/7 customer support. Try Squarespace at squarespace.com and enter offer code TOPFLOOR at checkout to get 10% off. Squarespace, build it beautiful. This is Tips from the Top Floor, episode 671 for Thursday, February the 19th, 2015.
Tips from the top floor, tips from the top, all right, from the top floor.
Hi Chris, this is Dave from Maine. I want to put a plug in for your photo workshops. You remember that I participated in a studio photo workshop way back in 2008, I think, and then again in Tübingen. Now, I like new gear just as much as the next guy, but I found your workshops and that learning environment to be way more useful. It's a better investment in my photography for sure. I travel a lot, and when I'm in a new place, I know I've got a limited amount of time to see the sights and take pictures. Your workshops have given me new skills to make the best use of my travel time. Most importantly, I enjoy making pictures much more, and they're better images. Having group feedback and your advice has given me both confidence and new skills. Oh, one more thing. I took that studio photo workshop out of curiosity. I had no particular interest in that type of photography, and really I still don't. But learning photography skills in a completely new field has really helped me in ways I never expected. Thanks for the support, Chris, and I look forward to our paths crossing again. Best wishes, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Wow, completely unsolicited voicemail. I'm so happy you sent that because it really reflects my thoughts on the whole thing. Learning new things is just way more helpful than buying a new lens. We'll talk a bit more about this in the rest of this episode, but this of course also gives me a nice way to briefly talk about the Real New York Inside Out workshop that I've teamed up to do end of this year in October. Yes, I will be back in the United States. It's a done deal. We have it open. You can register now. It'll start on October 9th. It'll be 2.5 days. And over the weekend, you are going to see New York from sides that most people will never get to see. And by the way, we even have special permits to shoot with tripods in Grand Central Terminal, which I always wanted to do because just the dynamic range and everything there. I will be doing some really cool stuff. I'm teaming up with Princeton Photo Workshop for that. They have plenty of access and experience and have done so many great things in and around New York. So Princeton Photo Workshop, highest recommendation, and I will do this workshop together with them. And if you have been on one of the previous workshops, make sure that you check your mailbox for a mail that went out just the other day on Wednesday, February the 18th, I sent it out. And because there's a special discount in it for you if you've been on one of my previous workshops or tours. Anyway, this is Tips from the Top Floor. Thank you so much for being tuned in. My name is Chris Marquardt, and this show is coming to you from the Viewfinder Villa right outside Hanover. By the way, if you happen to be in Germany, we'll do the official housewarming party in the Viewfinder Villa on March the 28th. And if you want to find out more about how to get there, and there's great accommodation around here at really decent prices, and it's really easy to get here. Go to viewfindervilla.com. Viewfindervilla.com. The website is in German and in English, so all the information is there for everyone to see. Maybe I can see a few of you, and put the date in your calendar. I will also issue an RSVP link where you can announce that you will come, and gives me a better idea what to plan for, how many snacks to have here and things, and champagne, and I don't know what else. Anyway, so that's it. Interesting show coming up. Really interesting show coming up. I will be talking to CJ Chilvers, who I've been quoting from, whose book I've been quoting from. And then we'll look at how to create a wallpaper pack, which is not as trivial as it sounds. Okay, so here he is. I have had him on the show before, quite a few years ago actually, when I first found out about him. And I've been quoting from his book here on the previous few episodes, right towards the end, right towards the very end actually. And here he is, CJ Chilvers.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what is the lesser photographer? The book. How did that come to be?
Well, I was just going to do it for myself and for the readers of my blog. It's 400 blog posts from the last several years condensed into maybe 40, 45 tiny chapters.
Which is an amazing read, because it's not just easy to read, because it's like in these short bits and snippets that are not that hard to get through, but from a content point of view, it's kind of interesting where this is going, and I think it's quite in line with some of my philosophy around photography. So you just released this as a book. It's an ebook. Is it also a paper book?
No. This is through Craft and Vision.
All right, and you pretty much massaged the blog and adapted it into the book. And yes, I started to quote from the book. So before we continue, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm just an amateur photographer with 25 years of experience being very amateur. And, but I'm a professional writer, so I'm writing what I know about. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I want people to learn from all my mistakes,
Okay. So the title kind of tells us a bit about what the book is about, a lesser photographer. But how exactly did that come along?
Well, that was, I tell the story in the introduction that it was just, some kind of frustration had been building in me, and I'm sure a lot of landscape photographers go through this. And I was just walking down a trail in a beautiful state park with my friend who's also a photographer. He's a semi-professional, and we just bumped into two other photographers on the trail and started talking about gear.
Oh, that rings a bell. That sounds so familiar.
Yeah, and it was just, I took about 5 minutes of it, and then I just said to myself, "Oh, this is crazy." I looked around me, and it was just beautiful. And there's been a book review of the book out there that shows pictures from exactly where I was, and I've put it in my newsletter too. And it's just it's stunning. It's waterfalls, it's canyons, and it's in the middle of the flat Midwest, so photographers just flock there. And to think that they're all flocking there to talk about their gear was just that was my breaking point. Mm-hmm. And after that point, I started the blog, and at that time, that was 2010 or maybe a little earlier. That was a pretty controversial idea. I just sold off all my gear, bought a little compact camera, and said, "Okay, let's see how far creativity can take me."
Yeah, and I've kind of seen all that, because I teach photography, and I do this in workshops, and of course there will be participants who come with a tiny little camera, and then there are participants who come with $50,000 worth of gear, and don't really have the pictures to show. Not all of them. Not all of them. I mean, but I really do see that a lot. That gear seems to be the center of photography for at least a certain type of photographer. So you sold all your gear. You went with a tiny, smaller compact camera, or what did you go with?
Yeah, at the time it was a Canon S90. I just bought whatever compact camera looked good.
Which is a great camera.
Yeah. Oh, it was, and they've really done well with that. But I went out with my friend who's still semi-professional, and he's got all the fancy gear and everything. And everybody looked at me like I was a lesser photographer, and so that's really where the title came from.
It's pretty amazing, because I make a point of every now and then putting like an iPhone picture in my Flickr stream,
Right.
without telling people. I actually remove the metadata, just as an experiment, and the reactions to those are not different from any of the others. So.
Right. If you look, there's a print equivalent to that. If you remember, or they still have them, all the photography magazines out there that are, all the best photographers in the world. And they put up their best pictures in these magazines, and the captions are all about the technical stuff, what equipment they use, if they used film, what kind of film, at what setting, and all that. And then if you compare those print magazines to other print magazines like National Geographic, where they don't print any of that material, they just tell the story. Which one sells better? Which one has more fans?
I think there is a certain kind of photographer who's looking for easy, simple solutions that can be achieved by throwing money at things. I think a lot of that is deeply ingrained in some people. If I only have this new lens, or if I only have that new camera, if I only have the faster memory card, I'll be a better photographer. And especially when you talk about the first two things are kind of hard to understand, but the third one, if I only have a faster memory card, I will be a better photographer. That's kind of where you start to realize that it's kind of a bit ridiculous, at least.
It's that lizard brain in all of us that just wants something easy. We resist the really hard creative questions, but that's where all the good stuff is. True.
So what is photography about for you?
Right now, it's all about my son, who's 3 years old, and he just provides me with the best snapshots you can imagine. I mean, he's got so much personality, and it's those snapshots are so much more important to me than anything I've done with landscapes, or it's not even comparable.
So you're a writer. Do you also have a technical mindset?
For writing,
interested in technology? Do you see similar things in the writing sphere? Do you go for good writing tools? Like, if you only use Scrivener, your writing is so much better than other tools. Is there something like that in the writing scene?
For writing, at least for me, it's different because I'm a professional writer. So I have a client, one big client in particular, who they expect certain things, so you have to have certain tools to provide that.
Oh, I see.
And I think that's a big difference, and I try to make that in the book, is that 99.9% of photographers, maybe even more than that, are amateurs. But when you're talking to a professional, that's an entirely different set of rules. Unfortunately, we've taken the professional set of rules and applied it to all the amateurs, and that's where we get into trouble.
Isn't that because that's kind of the dream of many photographers, to at one point in their life be able to sustain themselves just by taking photography, and to be able to give up their daytime job?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where, I went into the numbers on that in the book of what an actual, annual salary looks like for a photographer.
Not very good.
No, it's really bad. I mean, there's several other jobs you can do part-time that could probably make the same amount of money. And it's a bad feeling at first, but then you kind of feel liberated by it, because now you're not constrained by that set of rules. You can create your own constraints.
So the target audience for the Lesser Photographer book, it's targeted more towards amateurs, right?
Right. And that's pretty much everybody, if we're being honest,
I mean, especially nowadays, with pretty much every amateur having access to, in air quotes, professional equipment, the profession of photography is really changing fast, and there's a more and more blurry line between the two.
Right, and you see that in writing too, and in all the arts. It's when you have amateurs who have all the time in the world to solve these big creative problems. Professionals are spending most of their time on administrative stuff.
True.
It's very hard to compete. So
Administrative stuff, tax, organizing, planning. The photography is the smallest part of it. Yeah.
right. So that's a big part, I think, of the job of a professional, is to set yourself apart creatively instead of, with gear or even with technique, because everybody has access to that.
Absolutely. So how long did it take you from when you began with photography until you started thinking that way?
Oh, forever. It takes years of habit and practice to actually put into practice all these things that I'm trying to teach myself. That's all the blog is I'm trying to talk to myself.
Isn't it? I mean, that's pretty much what I do in the podcast. I do this to learn. I do this so I have to confront myself with these kind of questions and then find answers to them. If I didn't do the podcast, there wouldn't be much advancement in what I do.
Right. And it takes practice. I mean, you have to do it every day in order to get into that mindset. And that's why people don't. Amateurs don't. Professionals don't. It's not something they need to practice, so they don't.
Interestingly enough, even from a professional point of view, and I'm somewhere in between that. I didn't formally learn photography. I didn't study photography at a school, so I'm entirely self-taught. But even now, doing that on a much more professional level, I see that even a lot of the things that you write even ring with me as a professional, because I have had the camera that I shoot with for 5 years now.
You said that in a hushed tone.
Well, no, I'm actually very open about that. And it's and whenever people come to my workshops who have like the latest, greatest, most expensive gear that is way better than what I shoot with, there is this tiny little bit of gear envy coming up. But then when I start thinking about it and I force myself to think about it, I always end up with looking at my photos and looking at what kind of emotion they evoke, and then I all of a sudden don't see the need anymore to get new gear. So I will use this camera until it breaks. Right.
And and we've been thinking and talking about this for so long that's true for us, but no. And I heard on your last podcast, you were kind of lamenting how no matter how much you preach this stuff, like I do, it just doesn't take.
That's one of the big dilemmas. It doesn't take, and I think you really have to. Everyone has to learn that for themselves.
Yeah, you do. You really have to learn for yourself. And lately, if I hadn't been writing about this, I wouldn't have gone to the next step. It's not a big deal to say gear doesn't matter anymore. But when I'm kind of throwing away technique now too, that's when that's when the long knives come out, because that's where all the money is being made.
Yeah, is that in the book?
Yeah, it's really I think it's the first chapter. It's that you're already making perfectly fine photos. You don't need all these techniques that were mostly invented to please clients. And what happened was I was making a book about basically an encyclopedia of photography, and I traced back all of the techniques to as far back as I could, and it's just made out of nothing. There's a few techniques that have to do with biology, but most of them are just meaningless. They come from nowhere.
Give me an example.
An example of the biological ones would be the differences between black and white and color.
All right.
The brain really does interpret it differently, and that's why beginning students and masters of photography love black and white, because it shows off things that color can't.
True.
And also shows off mistakes. That's why students love it. I don't say maybe not love it, but their professors love it.
It's a good teaching tool.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
So that's not. So that has a biological actual reason for being. It goes back to the rods and cones and evolution and trying to escape prey at night and being able to see patterns in black and white because we see in black and white at night. Mm-hmm. And so that actually has a foundation in something. But some of the other techniques, especially a lot of the composition techniques, I just couldn't find a solid reason for them.
Oh, you're talking about golden mean and this kind of stuff?
Well, you see, that people swear there's a biological element to that.
But actually, I beg to differ, because I've seen other articles that went completely against that and said that the golden mean is, there's no proof in nature for the golden mean. There's as much stuff there that does not adhere to the golden mean than stuff that does adhere to the golden mean.
Right. There's a cult built around it.
That can be questioned for sure, yes.
Right, yeah. And to me, a lot of those techniques, I went back as far as I could, to painters and what worked for them. It just all seemed to revolve around what a client wanted at one point. Especially the old painters where we take a lot of our techniques from. They were working for people. And those people wanted a certain something, and we just carried those techniques forward into photography.
Now, let me ask you one question. You said somewhere in the book that it really helps if you shoot things that are important to you, because you're shooting lots of pictures of your son right now, because he's very important to you. But can't the technology also help evoke emotion in people who are really, really into technology, people who that is really important for? So I'm looking at photographers who really get a lot of satisfaction out of a very sharp picture or a perfectly exposed picture. Isn't that something that could be the case?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a really hard question to answer.
I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer.
No, because I think I've answered it for myself, but it's not going to really be good for anyone else. Mm-hmm. I think back to all the most important photos in history, and very few of them are even in focus. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So it gets me wondering if that's important even. And it's not with my son. I know it is, and I got plenty of blurry photos of him that are perfect, in my book.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had this. I think I mentioned it on the show several times that my mom got photos sent to her by my sister. And those were pictures of her grandkids, and they were sent her an email, down-resed to fit in an email, and my mom printed them out on copy machine paper, really blurry, kind of technically horrible. And I saw these pictures, and I was just about to start, but why don't you use photo paper and so on? And at the moment when I was about to say that, I saw the look in the eyes of my mom, and she just adores her grandchildren, and it's just the emotion is there, and it doesn't matter what medium she's looking at it.
And what's for all of us, what's the first thing we'll grab if there's a fire running out of the house? It's going to be those old
my lenses.
snapshots.
My lenses.
No, your lenses. Oh, come on. They're insured, right?
No, just kidding. The shoebox with photos. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because for a lot of people, that's not replaceable. A lot of people just don't scan or anything. So, but even if they did scan, there's no guaranteeing that'll be there.
Very true. So, CJ, your blog is at alesserphotographer.com. Where can people find the book? Because it's a high recommendation. I will quote chapters from it on this episode of Tips from Top Floor, on future episodes, but I really recommend everyone get a copy, have a look. Where would people find that?
That's at craftandvision.com.
Cool.
It'll be right on the front page. It should be.
Good. That's very good to see. All right. So thank you so much for coming on the show. And
thanks for having me. This is the best podcast that I go on. I've been on them all, and your listeners are the ones who show up at my site over and over again.
Perfect. I'm so glad I could convey some of the message and hopefully make the world a bit less gear focused. All right, CJ, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really can't tell you often enough how much I love hearing your voices on this show. Like the one in the beginning by Dave Mansion. That just makes my day. And it doesn't matter if it's a question or if you came across a story or just if you have some feedback like Dave, something for the show. It's really easy. Just go to tfttf.com, click on the orange tab on the right, and then just record something. And before you send it off, you get to listen to it again. You get to decide if it's good enough or just retry as often as you like. And of course, you can also pick up the good old phone. The phone lines are still open in the United States. That is 206-202-DSLR, 206-202-3757. And internationally, +447 005 805 742. I want to hear from you.
So listen.
Here's a quick word from our sponsor, lynda.com. It's already February. What are you waiting for? Invest in yourself this year and start learning something new at lynda.com. With a free 10-day trial, lynda.com is used by millions of people around the world and has over 3,000 courses on topics like web development, visual design, business, and of course, photography, as well as software training like Excel, WordPress, and Photoshop. All of their courses are taught by experts and new courses are added to the site every week. Whether you want to set new financial goals, find work-life balance, invest in a new hobby, ask your boss for a raise, find a new job, or just improve upon your current job skills in 2015, lynda.com has something for everyone. Sign up for your free 10-day trial today by visiting lynda.com/topfloor, and you'll get unlimited access to every course on lynda.com, access to view tutorials on tablets and iPhone and Android mobile devices, and access to new courses added every week. Now, let me do this live here, lynda.com, because I have an account there and I do look at their courses. Okay, here we are. Click on Browse the Library, then open up Photography. Here we go. I mean, the breadth of topics that they cover is just amazing. Let me just read some of the categories for you. There's a category, cameras and gear, one for portraits, one for masking and compositing, one for lighting, one for raw processing, sharing photos, retouching, photo management, color correction, printing photos, photography foundations, projects, documentaries, show more. Okay, I just clicked on show more and this whole list just doubled in size. Restoration, retouching, scanning, sharpening, visual effect. This is just the breadth of the offerings there are amazing. So invest in yourself and sign up for a free 10-day trial to lynda.com by visiting lynda.com/topfloor. That's lynda.com/topfloor. Go ahead. I challenge you to learn something new in 2015.
Down on that instrument.
So here we go. Let me tell you a bit about the Iceland 2015 wallpaper pack that I made, and especially how I made it, because I get this question over and over again. So what it is, first of all, what it is, and I started doing this last year, and I've done it again this year. So there's a Iceland 2014 wallpaper pack, and it's a set of 20 pictures, 20 of my favorite pictures from the Iceland trip, and it comes as a zip file, and in the zip file there are different subdirectories. Once you unzip it, you get a subdirectory for the different resolutions. So in total, I've increased the amount of resolutions now to 12 in total. And it starts as low as 1600 by 1200, and then 1920 by 1200, and 2560 by 600, and like a resolution for two screens next to each other, so you can span a wallpaper across two screens. And then there's resolutions for the iPhone 5, 5C, 5S, and iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, and the iPad third and fourth generation, and the iPad Air, and the iPad Mini, and the iPad Mini 2, and last but not least, 5K Retina resolution, which the new iMac 5K uses. So it's pretty much a process. I think I talked about it before here, but I found the reactions to be I found the reactions good enough to tell you about it again, especially as I slightly adapted the process this year. So you can do this too. Everyone can do this. Everyone can make one of these packs, and ending up with a total of 240 JPEGs that people can use on their desktops. It actually is quite a lot of work that goes into this, but I think it's worth it because I love it. I mean, just being able to put this on all my devices. So here we go. How do I do this? Well, first of all, the different resolutions, that's really important to realize. It's not just different resolutions, it also means different crops. I'm not squeezing or skewing the pictures in any way other than cropping them, because obviously if you do this for an iPhone, you have a portrait format aspect ratio, and if you do it for a widescreen, you have a widescreen. So one thing that comes from that is that every single picture and every resolution you have to touch. You have to make a decision if this crop works or not. So this is a real good exercise to learn cropping pictures in different ways, and you will quickly find out that some pictures just don't really work that well in a portrait aspect ratio, and some pictures will not really work in a super wide screen aspect ratio. So it's really that kind of influences the choice of pictures. And luckily, the desktop type of pictures, the ones that work really well on a desktop, are also usually the ones that are not too specific, like with a specific subject and so on. So, for example, one is is the blue surface of glacier ice, which is a close-up picture, and I just love how the bokeh pans out, how the sharpness is on this little ridge over the blue ice. So that is one that was really simple to do, because all I needed to have is the ridge in the picture somewhere in the middle. So finding crops for that was easy, but then there are others where finding a crop was a bit more difficult, especially pictures with really strong elements in them. But that pretty much means, yes, for 240 JPEGs, you have to change the crop 240 times, and that takes several hours of work. And it's not, it becomes repetitive. It becomes kind of boring after a while. But of course, you have to put the work in to get the result out. So the different crops are really something to consider. And then there are two major tools that I used to do this, and I've looked really hard and tried to first do it in Lightroom only, which is possible. You could have in Lightroom, you could have the same picture virtual. You could have virtual copies of the same picture. So for 12 different resolutions, that would mean main picture and 11 virtual copies that are all cropped in a different way. But then the problem becomes this. What you then do is you want to export those pictures. You have to pretty much build presets or manually dial in all these export sizes to make sure you get pixel perfect images. I mean, that's one of the goals here, that if the picture is croppable without losing any pixels, then absolutely I will do that, so that the picture on your desktop will be pixel perfect for the screen that you're using. I mean, that's the goal. That's the kind of the magic thing here, that that makes sure you get the best quality possible. So the only thing that I would be doing, obviously, is to downsize a picture, to reduce the resolution. So, for example, the 1600 by 1200 screen obviously doesn't need a full 21 megapixel picture. That is way less than that. So that warrants some downsizing. But downsizing doesn't degrade the quality as much as upsizing would. So anyway, that was not a real good solution. I played with it last year and I found that it didn't really work. But what I did then is, actually my brother pointed me to that. My brother is a graphic designer, so he pointed me to a tool called Slicey. Now, Slicey, made by a company called MacRabbit, is a tool that user interface designers really love, because what you can do is you can use Photoshop. So Photoshop and Slicey, that's the combination. And you can use Photoshop, and you can have, okay, this is tough to explain, but let me try anyway. Imagine you have groups in Photoshop. So when you set up layers, you would have 12 different layers, and each of those would be a different crop. So far, so good. So what you then do is you make each of those layers into a group, which is kind of like a folder. And inside that group, you could then have anything you like, and Slicey would render each of those groups individually. Okay, so what you do is you feed a PSD file from Photoshop into Slicey. You drag and drop it on Slicey, and then Slicey will go to work and it will look for groups. And what it'll look for is the group names being like file names. So you would call that first group, the first of the 12 different crops and resolutions, you would call that, let's say, 1600 by 1200.jpg. .jpg. And then Slicey will take whatever's in this group and render it out as a JPEG with that name. So then you have a second group, and the second group is 1920 by 1200 or 1920x 1200.jpg. So that would make a second JPEG. Slicey would render out a second JPEG from that second group, and so on. So I ended up having 12 different groups or folders in the layer panel in Photoshop, and each of those would have a different crop. So far, so good. That's fairly easy to do, but then you don't really save much work if you duplicate the picture for each of the groups and then do your own crop and so on. And especially this would result in a huge file. Just imagine you have a 21 megapixel image and you have 12 of those in a file. That would mean 12 layers that would just hugely increase the size of this file, unless you use a trick. And the trick is you make that background layer, you make that picture layer that you want to crop into a smart object. And when you converted that into a smart object, then you get to duplicate it. But it's not a duplication, it's a reference. So just by holding down the Alt key and dragging it to the new group, you will make a referencing copy. And then you can have 12 references, 12 copies of that smart object. And when you change one of those, all of the others will change as well. So just imagine now 12 groups or 12 folders, and each of them has a copy of that smart object that's not a real copy, but a reference to each other. So you end up saving a ton of space in those files. And then per image, like each of those 20 images gets one PSD file. So I'm ending up with 20 PSD files, and each of those having 12 groups. And each of those groups then, and now we get into the down and dirty with Slicey, because finding the right crop and making sure this is rendered out in the right resolution, in the right size and everything, you need to do one more trick to make Slicey work. And that is you include in each of those groups, you include one more layer that is titled bounds, at the @ and bounds. It's like a Twitter name, but doesn't mean that here. It's kind of a keyword for Slicey. And that is a rectangular layer. And that rectangular layer tells Slicey which part of the picture to crop. So pretty much you now get to resize the smart object, which is a smart object after all. So you won't really change pixels in it. You will reference to the real size, to the biggest size. And then the @bounds layer is going to determine where Slicey is gonna choose the crop. So you now get to move around the @bounds layer without changing it, because that is at a precise pixel perfect resolution. So I have in the 1600 by 1200 group, I have now the smart object copy of the original picture of the blue ice on the beach. And then I have an @bounds rectangle, which I created exactly two 1600 by 1200 pixels, and you can do this in the new rectangle creation tool. There's a way up there. There's a little cogwheel icon, and you click that, and then you can give it an explicit size, and then you put that in there, and you don't change the size of that because that is going to be your actual crop. And then all you have to do is move around and resize the smart object to fit to make a good crop within the at bounds layer. And actually, I set the at bounds layer to 50% opacity, so I could actually see what I was working on, and that worked really, really well. So now the at bounds layer determines the actual size and the name of the group. The 1600x1200.jpg determines the file format and where it should export. I know this will not make much sense to you if you are not into Photoshop, but it is really the best way I found to do this. And then once I have those 12 groups named after the different resolutions, and I have those inside those groups, the 12 at bounds layers to tell Slicey how to slice and dice this PSD file, that will then render out a bunch of JPEGs, 12 in total for each of the PSDs. And they will be big because I assume it's going to render maximum quality. So I ended up with all those 20 pictures and all the 12 per picture rendered out JPEGs. I ended up with 1.11 gigabytes in total, which is not going to work because I can't sell you a wallpaper pack and then have you download 1.11 gigabytes. I'm not Apple. I'm not Microsoft. I don't have a content delivery network, and you certainly do not want to wait until the 1.11 gigabyte has been downloaded over your, 5 megabit line. It's just too long. So this would never work, but at least I have the pictures now. And this is where the second stage of this process comes in, and that is, what the heck am I going to do to make this thing smaller without compromising on the quality? So there's one tool that I thought would work here, but didn't. But it's still one of those tools that if you really need to squeeze enough size out of a JPEG, is actually quite a good companion, and it's called iResize, IRESIZE. That's on the Mac, so I don't know what an equivalent would be on Windows, but it allows you to get a good preview at the actual size of the picture, and then you get to pull a slider and test out what resolutions still actually work with that picture without getting you into weird pixelation and other artifacts. And it's amazing how much you actually can squeeze out of a JPEG without it visually making a serious difference. And interestingly enough, even if it makes a slight difference, the content matter of that picture will really determine if it works or if it doesn't. So I've been able to squeeze down pictures of stuff that was showing, okay, this is hard to word, but the problem is if you have pictures that have things in there that people know and can relate to, it's kind of harder to compress them stronger because any sort of artifact will just jump out at the viewer and go, oh, wow, this does not look right. But if you have things in the picture that are more abstract, like a blue thing of ice on a beach that is weirdly curved and so on, you can get away with a higher compression without anyone being able to tell. And it does work. It actually does work. So I did an A/B test with some of those pictures with pretty high compression, and I wasn't able to tell which one was which. And I took those pictures, right? So now iResize, again, is kind of a clunky tool, but I think it's pretty much made with graphic design professionals in mind, but it does work. But it does not work for the resolutions I was going for here, because this time around I was including a 5K retina resolution, which is 14 megapixels. And the iris size picture only goes to a certain size, but it does not go as far. Just for some stupid reason, it doesn't allow working on pictures with that high of a resolution. So I had to ditch that. And then I looked around and I eventually ended up actually opting for one of those drag and drop, make everything automatically good tools, because it really ended up working. And the tool is called JPEG Mini. And it's got a cutesy little design, and it's really just a drag and drop kind of thing. And you throw a JPEG on it, and it will give you the option to, I think, either replace the original picture or save them somewhere else. And that's pretty much it. The algorithms in there are going to try to determine how well that picture can be compressed without making a visual difference. And I think it's about 20 euros. That's, I think, what I paid for it. And you can do like 10 pictures without having to pay, so you can try it out. And throwing the JPEGs on there was a bit of a revelation, because the pictures really didn't change that much, but the size changed. So the visual change was minimal, while the size change was maximized. So where I had 1.11 gigabytes before, after running all those pictures through the JPEG Mini compression process, I ended up with 175 megabytes, which was fun because that really makes it downloadable, right? So, and by the way, I did a quality check. I went to all the 240 JPEGs, each individually, compared them with the original, which was a whole lot of work. But, you know, quality assurance in this kind of a with this kind of a product is really important, because I wouldn't want anyone to dig out a picture and then it look horrible on their iPhone. So it really did work for me, and it managed to squeeze a lot of space out of these pictures. And then there's a second step. So 175 megabytes was quite good, but then there's a second one, and it's called Image Optim. IMAGEOPTIM, which again squeezes out a bit more from the pictures. And now I ended up at 167 megabytes, and all of that put together in a zip file together with a PDF that tells a bit about the pictures. It gives you some stories about those pictures. Altogether zipped up 166.7 megabytes. So I'm more than happy that this process actually works, and I guess I'm gonna do it again for some other pictures some other time. So here is for you the tips from the Toffler listeners. Actually, a little coupon code that is just for you. Don't pass it on. That gives you 50% off the wallpaper pack if you're interested in having a look at the pictures, getting your hand on it. You go to tfttf.com/IcelandWPP. Again, that's tfttf.com/IcelandWPP, IcelandWPP. And the coupon code is HappyShooting50. That's HappyShooting50, and that will knock 50% off of the price. And 5 lucky winners will get one for free. Yay! Freebies are always good. All you have to do is go to tipsfromthetoffler.com, tfttf.com/671. That's this episode's page, and write a comment. And make the comment start with "I want a free Iceland wallpaper pack because," and then just complete the sentence. And again, tfttf.com/671. Leave a comment. You have 1 week of time. Today's 19th of February. So I need this until the end of the 25th to announce the 5 winners in the next episode. Let me spend a minute and tell you about this week's sponsor, Squarespace. Building a website can be tough. And even if you do know your way around coding, creating something that looks good and works well is a time-consuming affair. Whether it's for a business, for a restaurant, or your photo portfolio, or whatever else, in this day and age, you probably need one anyway. Well, lucky for us, Squarespace makes it easy to build beautiful websites without breaking a sweat. Squarespace provides simple, powerful, and beautiful website templates for you to work with. Not only that, but those templates are part of Squarespace responsive design, which means your website scales to look great on any device, further minimizing the hassles of making a website on your own. Every website you build also comes with a free online store if you need it. Just need something minimalistic but powerful? Their cover page feature also allows you to set up a beautiful one-page online presence in minutes. Now, I know what I'm talking about because years ago, we built a website for my mother where she posts her gluten-free recipes. It's a really nice thing to be able to do that, but it was a whole lot of work, lots of PHP code in the backend and database stuff, and I don't want to think back to how I did this. And then when she asked me if I could build a blog for her, I was like, you know what? let me set up this Squarespace page for you. And she's now using Squarespace. She can post everything herself. It's just super easy to handle. It looks good. It works. Seriously, you can't beat the ease and simplicity of Squarespace. Squarespace gives you 24/7 online support and a beautiful website for only $8 a month. You can even get a free domain if you buy Squarespace for the year. So what are you waiting for? Start a trial with no credit card required and start building your website today. And then when you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use offer code TOPFLOOR to get 10% off your first purchase and to show support for Tips from the Top Floor. And I really thank Squarespace for their support of Tips from the Top Floor. Squarespace, build it beautiful. Okay, watch this. Yes, watch this. I haven't done this in a long time. The Watch This segment, which is where I give you something to watch about photography that is supposed to help you look beyond what you know, to broaden your horizons. And I've just been sent by a listener, a link to a video, which is, I think it's on the Phase 1 website. It's kind of an ad for Phase 1, but not really. It's a look at a photo shoot. Photographer Jason Bell is on a photo shoot and he's shooting Benedict Cumberbatch for Vanity Fair. It's a kind of a fashion shoot, and yes, he does shoot with a Phase 1 medium format camera, so it can be looked at as a bit of an ad, but then you get to see, and I would do this with an SLR, probably with a DSLR. But you get to see how this whole professional fashion photography business kind of works behind the scenes with his assistants and the generators and the lights and the smoke machines and things. It's really a great look behind the scenes of how one professional photographer works. Not all of them work this way, but he does, and really gets a high recommendation from me if you love looks behind the scenes, because that's what it is. It's also fun to see the interaction between the two, and you can tell that Cumberbatch actually is enjoying the work with Jason Bell, and you'll see this when he goes beyond what he's been asked to do and jumps into a lake. It's just a lot of fun to watch. I was watching that with a big grin on my face, very insightful, and it can just give you a bit of an idea what's going on in the professional world of photography. And there is a whole page with the past watch this links and this watch this link as well, and you can find that at tfttf.com/watch this. Okie dokie, that was it for this episode of Tips from the Top Floor. Thank you so much for being subscribed. Thank you so much for listening. And support the show on Patreon. Get rewards for your support. Find everything at tfttf.com/Patreon. I've just sent out another behind the scenes TFTTF Inside video to the Patreon feed. And I've hidden some nice discounts in there. And a big thank you to all the patrons who already support Tips from the Top Floor. The previous workshop participants have a special mail in their mailbox. So again, check if you have it, if you've been on one of the previous workshops. If you cannot find it, or if it, went to your spam folder, send me a quick email. Let me know which workshop you were on and I will send you a copy of it. It's worth it. And then again, if you want one of the 5 Iceland wallpaper packs for free, just post a comment to this episode, tfttf.com/671. Post a comment there. Complete the sentence, I want the Iceland wallpaper pack because. And then all you have to do is do this until February the 25th, 2015. Music for the show by Jeff Smith, by Josh Woodward, The Natives of the New Dawn, and Hans-Peter Kagerud. Publishing of the show is done by Release Pixie, Matt Refsitar Armstead. And here's the quote of the day from CJ Chilvers, a lesser photographer. Declare independence. Independent thought is the scarcest resource in photography today. Not talent, not money, not technical ability. Blogs, books, magazines, and workshops tend to parrot each other. Which photographers have remained interesting throughout? The ones who were doing what the others hadn't considered. In the 1960s, touring with a rock band as their photographer was not what the professionals were doing. Those unique, timeless images have made worthwhile careers and worthwhile lives for those photographers. Touring with a rock band as their photographer today doesn't have the same impact because it's what the professionals do. It's not unique anymore. It's a well-established process. What unique images can you bring the world today that the professionals aren't? The dependence we have on pros to tell us how to shoot and how to present our photography serves to only make our work just like the thousands of other photographers who listened to the same message. Some of the pros out there who are dispensing the advice are only professionals at dispensing advice. Some are downright con artists. How can you tell the difference? You can't. You have to decide if the advice makes sense for your photography. You have to decide if reading this book is a good use of your time. You have to decide if the writer is credible. You have to decide how to spend your time in this hobby. Don't let someone else decide for you. My name is Chris Marquardt. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Marquardt. That's Chris Marquardt. Leave a review on iTunes. Recommend the show to others. Until next time, go out and take amazing photos. And as usual, happy shooting.